So let's start today with a quick little prayer to Ganesha. It's just a prayer that we learned at the Ayurvedic Institute that Dr. Lad taught, which is a combination of 2 or 3 different Ganesha mantras. And so I'll just recite it and you can follow along if you know it. So here we go. Om Gananaham Tvam Ganapatigum Havamahi Kavim Kavina Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanas Pata Shranvannu Tibihi Sida Sadhanam Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvighnam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Siddhi Buddhi Shakti Sahita Shriman Mahagana Dipataye Namo Namaha Nirvighnam Kuru. Hari Om Tat Sat. All right, so today we're going to be discussing spiritual yogas, meaning combinations in a horoscope that you can use to identify that the bearer of the horoscope as a spiritually motivated person. And even to find some other details like what type of spirituality might they be interested in. But before we go down that route, I would like to share with you a quick little graph that I've made up here, which is a continuation of last week's the last class where we talked about nakshatras. And I mentioned that there are certain nakshatras that are light in quality, during which it's good to do sales and business, to buy and sell things, and such as Hasta nakshatra and Pushya nakshatra, which are light in quality, and Ashwini nakshatra, which is here. And there are other nakshatras which are hard or fierce or dreadful, like Mula nakshatra, which are good for breaking things. Like, let's say you need to demolish your home, or you need to do some digging in your garden, which is hard work, right? You need a shovel, you need a pickaxe, you need to break rocks, you need to pull roots. Well, Mula nakshatra is good for that because it's fierce. Ardra nakshatra is also good for that, as is Magha. They are both fierce nakshatras. And if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, refer to the last class we did on this, where we went over the different groupings of the nakshatras. And then there are certain nakshatras which are soft, and they're good for making love, for going on a date, for creating art and beauty, like Anuradha, or Mrigashira, or Chitra. They are the soft and gentle nakshatras. You wouldn't want to go into surgery on one of these nakshatras because you don't want your surgeon getting cold feet. Oh, but this is such beautiful skin. I would hate to cut into it. No. You want you want them focused and motivated, right? And then there are certain nakshatras which are mixed, soft and sharp. They can do both. Vishakha and Kritika were the soft and sharp nakshatras. They can be hard and soft. And people who have these nakshatras prominent have that quality. If you know a person with Vishakha as their rising nakshatra, at certain times they can be sweet and gentle, but then when they're in a mood, they can be extremely sharp and motivated and cutting. Same thing with Kritika. And then there are the fixed nakshatras and so on. So the point is there are different qualities for each nakshatra that fit a different activity that you may be interested in doing. Today I want to show you very quickly this table, which gives us bad days and bad nakshatras specific to a certain day of the week. Meaning, on a Sunday, when the moon is in Vishakha nakshatra. So for all of these, we're tracking the moon's placement. Now, can everybody see my screen, by the way?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So when the moon is in Vishakha nakshatra. Now, if you don't have the nakshatras memorized, or you don't know Vishakha from Jyeshta, don't worry. You can just ignore this, or take a coffee break now, or whatever you like. But if you are working with the nakshatras, I think you'll find this a useful tool. My warning to you now beforehand is just don't get too obsessed with it. Don't be like, oh my God, I can't leave the house because today is a Sunday and the moon is in Jyeshta. Well, this is not so that you will obsess over it. This is to bring awareness of how celestial phenomena affect mundane life. Okay? So, there we go. So on a Sunday, if the moon is in Vishakha, Utpata happens. Now the Sanskrit term Utpata means, Ut means up, Pata means to fly. So things fly up in the air suddenly. You're getting married and all of a sudden it starts raining. There is a sudden, unexpected, usually unwanted event that happens. So if you're planning a wedding, there might be a windstorm, or the cops might come because you're too loud, or something sudden, unexpected. And because when we plan things, we want smoothness and continuity, it's usually seen as a negative thing. Unless it's a biker wedding, in which case there's going to be something sudden and unexpected anyway, and then you just kind of roll with it. No offense to any bikers out there. Then on a then still on a Sunday, so Utpata means unexpected or and negative. Mrityu is, you could probably guess, means death. Mrita and is the source of the word mortal, mortality, and so on. And Mrityu means death. So on a Sunday, when the moon is in Anuradha and it's a Sunday, something will end, something will die. It's not a good day to begin something auspicious like you're starting your business, etc., etc. Okay? And then finally, Kana. Kana means one-eyed, cockeyed. So if it's Sunday and the moon is in Jyeshta nakshatra, you shouldn't be afraid to leave the house. It's just that things may be cockeyed. They may turn out half done, or not quite the way you want them. All right? So the first three here are negative. The next two are positive. Siddhi means accomplishment. You get everything done. So on a Sunday, if the moon is in Mula nakshatra, that's considered very good. Meaning that even though Mula is a dreadful nakshatra normally, when it's on a Sunday, it means that you accomplish what you need to accomplish. Siddhi means accomplishment. Comes from the root sad, which has to do with hitting the target with archery and getting to your goal, hitting the center of the target. And that's why the term sadhana in Sanskrit, which has to do with spiritual practice, it comes from this. It's related. Means achieving the goal, sitting and connecting with the divine. That's the goal of your sadhana, your spiritual practice. And finally, on a Sunday, if the moon happens to be in Hasta nakshatra, then you have Amrita. And Mrita means death, Amrita means immortality. Because the prefix a is like our prefix un in English, and it means undead. but not in the creepy zombie way that we say the term undead, in the very beautiful way that means immortal, mortal, immortal. So any action you undertake on this day will not only succeed, but it will become immortal, meaning its fruits will last forever. You know, pretty big claims, right? Today I'm cooking khichdi, and this will be the most Amrita khichdi ever cooked. So on a Sunday, if the moon happens to be in Hasta, in Hasta Nakshatra, that's a Amrita day for starting anything. All right. Any questions on this so far? And please don't ask me what is a nakshatra. If that's the question, which is a valid question, but that's a question for another time. Meaning, you know, we have to go more remedial and go through what are the nakshatras and so on. But any questions about this table specifically? Okay. Now, you can see, those of you now who have been working with the nakshatras, you can probably see that there is an order here. That there is an order to these nakshatras. So they start with Vishakha, Anuradha, Jyeshtha, and Mula. These are actually in the celestial order of the nakshatras. And then they go back up, Purvashada, Uttara, Abhijit, Shravana, and then back up. The Amrita nakshatras are not in any order. So Amrita are the immortal nakshatras for that day, when the moon is in that nakshatra on that day, and they are separate. But here there is an order. And I should probably start with Ashwini. So in the zodiac, the nakshatras start with Ashwini, and you can see Ashwini, Bharani, Kritika, Rohini, Mriga, Ardra, Narvasu, Pushya, Ashlesha, Magha, Purva Falguni, Uttara Falguni, Hasta, Chitra, Swati, and so on, and then Vishakha, Anura. This is the natural order. So if you've memorized the order of the nakshatras, this will become easy for you. So you know on a Sunday, starting with Vishakha, they go in order, and these are the three bad ones, and Mula, and then back up like this. Or just have this table handy. So then on a Monday, when the moon is in Purvashada or Uttarashada, not good, but the moon in Shravana means you accomplish your goals. The moon in Mrigashira means whatever you do has immortal lasting significance. You go to the store to buy fruit. It is an epic event if the moon is in Mrigashira on a Monday. And so on for Tuesday, Wednesday, and then for Thursday, the Amrita day for a Thursday is when the moon is in Pushya. Now, this is a very special day because Pushya is considered really the cream of the crop of nakshatras in terms of auspiciousness. Thursday is considered the cream of the crop of days of the week for auspiciousness because it's ruled by Jupiter. And so when the moon is in Pushya on a Thursday, it's a special day, and it happens once or twice a year. And in fact, you can go to an almanac, a Vedic almanac, that will show you these days, and I'll go to that in a little bit. But this is a very special day to keep in mind. In fact, all of the Amrita days are special, to be honest with you. But the Guruvar, the Pushya, is especially considered auspicious. In fact, when we did our Tahiti retreat, I made it a point to pick that day to start the retreat. And despite the fact that it was in between eclipses and whatnot, it still ended up being a fairly auspicious event, I think. So that's one way you can plan events, is start them on the Amrita day. Okay, and that's another way to use nakshatras. Now I want to introduce you really quickly, before we move on to our spiritual yogas, the main topic for today. to the Indian almanac, which I think all of you should become familiar with at this point. Here we go. So, for example, so this is, so this page is drikpanchang.com. And this is a page for the Vedic almanac, meaning that you could pretty much, anything that has to do with dates and auspicious dates and times, you'll find in this website. It's extremely detailed. For example, let's just take a little navigation through here. This is Guru Pushya Yoga. If I click here, Guru Pushya Yoga is when the moon is in Pushya Nakshatra on a Thursday. And it will tell you when that is for each. So let's see, it's not in May, it's not in, oh, there it is in March. March 9th, 2017, Guru Pushya Yoga. Let's see if it happened before then. February 9th also, we had Guru Pushya Yoga. Oh, we also had it January. Wow, that's pretty auspicious. But most months you're not gonna have it. See, it wasn't there in December and so on. Not in November. So we had it 3 months in a row this year, which is great. So that's Guru Pushya Yoga. Amrita Siddhi Yoga, if you look at this is what I was just covering, the Amrita days. This is the Amrita days. So when the moon is in one of these nakshatras on the appropriate day, it's called Amrita day. So this calendar will tell you when that is. Let's go back to our calendar. So if I click here, Amrita Siddhi days. All right, we'll look at for April. We've got Saturday, April 9th, Sunday. So these are a few days that it happens, and it'll even give it to you for your location. So if I type in Phoenix, Arizona, it will give me the correct time for the Amrita Siddhi that day. Okay, so this is a useful website for picking things like this. If we go to Hindu calendar here, now this doesn't mean we're all converting to Hinduism, but looking at the calendar can also help you find auspicious days, because that's the point of this presentation, is to help you find auspicious days. Now, there is one auspicious day called Akshaya Tritiya, that whatever is happening in your horoscope or in the world, anything that's begun on Akshaya Tritiya, this day, is considered auspicious. Because this is the day astrologically when the sun is exalted and the moon is exalted. So April 28th, just to prove it to you, I'm gonna put up, here is the horoscope. I was just looking at Bono's chart, by the way, and man, does he have combinations for money, this guy. Anyway, let's leave aside Bono for the moment. And pull up a prashna and go to April 28th. So this is the chart for April 28th. Can you see the sun here is in Aries, exalted, which it is all month, by the way, from April 15th through May 15th, roughly speaking. So the sun is exalted for a whole month. But the moon is also exalted. This is the day called Akshaya Tritiya. Akshaya means, it's kind of like Amrita, means that which never fades away. Tritiya means the third day of the lunar cycle from new moon to new moon. Or from new moon to full moon, there's 15 days, and from full moon to new moon, another 15. So this is the third of the waxing cycle. It's called Tritiya. Anyway, that part isn't as important, but the main thing is that this is astrological. The sun is exalted, moon is exalted on Akshaya Tritiya. So you can pretty much do anything you want, regardless of how it looks, how the day looks in your chart, because it's considered a free pass, a mulligan day. Not just a mulligan day, it means that whatever you do that day should turn out auspicious, all other factors being equal, and all other factors being, your karma. So if you have no wealth producing yogas in your horoscope and you're starting a business on Akshaya Tritiya, will you get off on the right foot? You bet. But does that mean you will become a billionaire? Well, probably not, because you have to have the combos in your chart. By starting off on the right day, you are, getting the most out of your chart, but, you can't create something out of nothing. So this is an auspicious day, Akshaya Tritiya. Every year, it's once a year. So you can add that to our table. And so hopefully that this has been useful for you to give you another layer for timing events. I've already taught a couple of, I believe, I've given a couple of presentations to our Dharma Type class on how to choose a good day. You want the moon nice and bright. You don't want it in the 6th, 8th, or 12th house of your chart, and so on and so on. In addition to that, consider these as layers, okay? But consider these as layers that apply to the whole world. The moon in Hasta on a Sunday is good for everybody. If it falls in your 8th house, it might not be so good. But if it falls in your 9th house of luck and prosperity and divine grace, then that might be an especially positive day for you. So everything still has to be considered from your horoscope or the chart of the person that you are reading for. But this is yet another layer. So any questions about this before now we move on to the main topic for today? This has been the appetizer, which is spiritual yogas. Any questions?
I don't have a question for what you just said. That's fine, but I wanted to ask if we're gonna be able to talk about the previous class that we did, if there's any time to have like a few questions or something, if there are any questions.
Yeah, the previous class on the nakshatra qualities or on the marriage?
The marriage part.
Let's leave that
for another time.
Let's leave that for another time, possibly next week. Or if you can't wait and it's pressing, just set up a time with me and I'll be happy to answer them one-on-one with you.
No, I can wait. I mean, I was wondering if in general the group also has any other questions, because it just felt that, that
there wasn't time, right, to cover that, right. And you're right. We went through the marriage pro forma, and it would be very good to go back and actually do some real life question and answer. It's just that everyone wanted this spiritual class, so we're doing it. So we'll go back to...
No problem. We'll do it another time. No problem. I can wait.
All right, good. Yes, so, I'm here for you guys. So whatever you guys want to talk about and study, that's what we'll do. And if I know that we're going to do marriage next week, I'll even prepare, believe it or not. And then we can really do an intensive Q&A. Today I've prepared for a different topic. So let's stick with this topic, and we'll do marriage next week, part 2. All right? Perfect. So, all right, well, let's let's dive into this then. So, where to start? Basically, when we look at a horoscope, we are looking at it through the lens. The most powerful lens to view a horoscope through is yogas. Yogas are truly the unique feature, or one of the truly unique features of Vedic astrology that's separated from any other type of astrology. So if we were to look at Bono's chart, for example, as I mentioned before, there are a number of wealth-producing yogas, some of which I've taught, some of which I haven't. And actually, this is actually a very good segue into our spiritual class, because I think most, while Bono is not an ascetic, most would consider him a spiritually inclined person, right? Since the late 70s and early 80s, he's been singing about injustice in the world, right? And been particularly active in seeking justice for those who are underserved, whether they be in Ireland or in Africa. And so Bono has a version of Lakshmi Yoga. Now, why do I bring up Lakshmi Yoga? Because the first principle I'm going to teach you guys today is that the yogas that are associated with the gods and goddesses of the Hindu tradition are spiritual yogas, including yogas for wealth like Lakshmi, because Lakshmi is a goddess of wealth, but also of charity, of giving, of prosperity. So Lakshmi, the goddess Lakshmi, bridges the material and the spiritual, right? We pray to her, or people pray to her when they want to be taken care of, when they want mundane prosperity, but they also want happiness, fulfillment. And fulfillment comes from producing good karma in the world, from goodness, right? At least lasting fulfillment does. And so Lakshmi, people who possess Lakshmi Yoga, like Bill Gates, like Bono, and I'll explain to you why Bono has Lakshmi Yoga. I've given you one definition. There is another slightly different definition which he has. But people like Bono or Bill Gates or others who possess Lakshmi Yoga, they tend to be charitably minded because of an inner spiritual drive to help others. So we'll begin with Lakshmi Yoga as the first spiritual combination. Okay? Now, the definition of this Lakshmi Yoga is, now, the reason, first of all, that there are multiple or more than one definition is because there are different authorities. There is the granddaddy of Vedic astrology who's named Parashara. And in his book, Lakshmi Yoga is formed thus. When the ninth Lord, so let's find the ninth Lord, first of all, for this chart. Who is the ninth Lord? Now, this is where I want you guys to participate a little bit. Who is the ninth Lord in this chart?
Sun.
The sun, right? The ninth Lord, the ninth house has Leo. So the sun rules Leo. So this is the definition. You can write this down. When the ninth Lord is exalted or in his own sign, okay, in a Kendra or a Kona house. So by the way, this is the same definition that we've already learned, right, for Lakshmi Yoga. When the ninth Lord is in a Kendra, houses 1, 4, 7, 10, 1, 4, 7, 10, or a Trikona, houses 1, 5, 9. Now, this is where this definition differs, because the original says when the ninth Lord is in a Kendra or Trikona and exalted or in his own sign, and if Venus is also that, exalted or in its own sign in a Kendra or Trikona. But the other definition is, and the Lagna Lord is the same. or at the very least, the Lagna Lord should be strong. So who is the Lord of the Lagna?
Jupiter.
Jupiter.
And
So,
Simon, can you say that one more time? I just want to make sure I caught it all.
absolutely. So this definition of Lakshmi Yoga, I'll say the full thing is, when the Lord of the ninth house is exalted or in his own sign and in a Kendra or Trikona house, that's part one, and the Lord of the Lagna is strong, a Lakshmi Yoga is present.
Thank you.
And the first version that we've already learned is when the Lord of the ninth house is in its own or exalted sign in a Kendra or Trikona, and Venus is also in a Kendra or Trikona exalted or in its own sign. Now, by that definition, do we have a Lakshmi Yoga here? Let's start with the first part, the Lord of the ninth. What's going on with the Lord of the ninth?
It isn't his own, no, it's exalted.
The sun, the Lord of the ninth, is in Aries,
Aries.
exalted. And is it in one of the houses that we need it to be in?
Yes.
Yes. So there we go. The first part is fulfilled. The Lord of the ninth exalted in the fifth. Now, the second part of the yoga says Venus should be the same. So is Venus in one of these houses?
It is.
But
it's not. It's not in her own sign, neither exalted.
very good. So technically, Venus misses out on this. But I'm going to make a little, even just using my Jyotish intuition. Looking at Venus, I can see that it sits in Bharani Nakshatra. Now, I know these nakshatras and their rulers, but if you don't know them, you can still access it here. Venus is in Bharani, which is ruled by Venus. So it sits in its own nakshatra. And that's kind of like sitting in its own sign. So in a sense, if you fudge things a little bit, yes, it's not the classical definition, but Venus sits in its own nakshatra. And it sits there with the sun. And so we could even say that this is a qualified Lakshmi Yoga by that first definition. Okay, but let's try the second definition and see if it works. So the second definition is the ninth Lord in its own exalted. We have that. And the Lagna Lord must be strong. Well, who's the Lagna Lord? We said Jupiter. Is Jupiter strong?
Yes.
How?
Because it's on the first house and is in his own sign.
And what is the significance of it being in the first house? How does that make it strong?
Because it's in a Kendra or a Kona?
No.
No.
So the ways
Digbala?
it is Digbala. Yes. Digbala is a source of strength, directional strength. Now, if you guys don't know, some of you who are here, as guests in this class, if you're not familiar with these terms, this is something we've studied in the past, 6-7 months of how planets gain strength. And I'll just summarize them very quickly. A planet can be strong if it's in its own sign, if it's exalted, if it's retrograde, if it's Digbala, or in the case of the moon, if it's a full moon. And we actually studied a sixth way, which is if it's Vargotama, which means that it's in the same sign in the Navamsha. So those are the sources of strength for a planet. Now look at this Jupiter. How many of these does it actually have? So yes, it is in its own sign in Sagittarius. That's one. Boom. So Lakshmi Yoga is done. Right there, we've got Lakshmi Yoga. But look, Jupiter is also retrograde. Boom, that's 2. And as Eleni pointed out, it is also in the first house, which means for Jupiter, it is Digbala. Folks, this is a triple strong Jupiter. the Lord of the first in the first. I mean, just by itself, this is enough to say this person is operating on a very, kind of high level. And are they kind of full of themselves? You bet your butt. They think they're great. But to succeed in the world to a great degree, you need to think that you're great. You need to have that confidence to push through criticism, to push through naysayers. This triple strength Jupiter as the ruler of the Lagna is uniquely equipped. But wait, Saturn's there. Yeah, so there will be times when he has misgivings. But the fact that this Jupiter is so strong, and even more importantly, participates in a Lakshmi yoga, now means that this person is not just very self-confident, but the world will reward them with millions and millions of dollars in riches. Okay, so that's Lakshmi yoga is present, and now that first instance of Venus, I'm more and more justified in believing that that also is a Lakshmi yoga. So this person definitely has at least one Lakshmi yoga, if not by both definitions, which then gives us some of the Lakshmi qualities in their life. They will be very wealthy and will likely have a disposition that is a charitable one. So this is considered a spiritual yoga. Okay?
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So let's say in a horoscope, you don't have all of those three, but but you have the Venus and the Lagna Lord, but you don't have the ninth Lord. Will you still consider that it's kind of like Langsi yoga, or
kind of like which yoga?
that yoga? Yes.
I didn't hear you very clearly. The computer must have cut out. What was it again?
Yoga. I can't say it. Don't do that.
You mean the Lakshmi yoga? Yes. Yeah. So yeah, you can use your intuition, your leaps of intuition, and if you feel like, yeah, this is something Lakshmi-like here going on, you can go there. This is why we learn the yoga, so you know the technical definition, but then you can also fly, you can improvise, right? The yogas are like your scales in music. Once you've got your scales down, then you can improvise. So if you see a yoga in which the Venus is just brilliant, but the ninth Lord is just okay, but there's also other good stuff going on, then you can go there. This is, and again, this is why a computer can't really do Jyotish the way a human can, because it's about synthesizing multiple things. And sometimes they asked a chess player, they asked Bobby Fischer once, how do you know what the right move is? And he said, you just know. You look at the board, you consider it, and there's only one right move out of millions and millions, but you just know it, you feel it. So it's the same thing with Jyotish. After you've seen a bunch of combos and right, a lot of yogas, you'll start to get a feel for what's Lakshmi, what's not. So, but first learn the, the definitions. What I will do for you guys is I will write out all of the yogas we're studying today and put them in a PDF in the folder along with this class so that you can download them later. So for now, just kind of listen and and take notes, and then you'll have the printout of the yogas later. All right, so that's Lakshmi yoga. Now, another yoga that is named after a goddess is Saraswati yoga. So Saraswati is, let's write it out here. So yogas. Lakshmi, we've done. So Saraswati. And please don't be intimidated by these names. You know, we could translate these into Lakshmi, you know, you can have an equivalent. Why would you want to? My point is, don't be intimidated. Don't feel like you have to be a Hindu to use this, okay? I don't consider myself a Hindu, but I certainly avail myself of this technology and its wonderful mythology as well. So Saraswati is the goddess of culture and learning. She is the goddess of beauty, art, civilization. She brings, whereas Lakshmi brings physical prosperity, like a big family, children, lots of wheat and cars and cows and goodies in your life, right? Saraswati brings cultural abundance, music, the understanding of different languages, of art, of the different sciences, of knowledge and wisdom. So Saraswati is the goddess of knowledge and wisdom. And in fact, in the Vedic tradition, the many cities were built around the river named Saraswati, which dried up about 1500 BC. So certainly those civilizations were thriving well before then. Many people think around anywhere between 5,000 to 7,000 BC or more or older that lived around the river. And what happens when you live by a river is, you know, one town can send musicians, can send politicians, can send tradespeople down the river to the other town, right? So there is communication, there is education and flow. So the way you see if a person is blessed by Saraswati in the horoscope is you see if they have Saraswati yoga. Saraswati yoga is formed when Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, all three, are in a Kendra, Trikona, or the second house. And Jupiter is not weak, meaning Jupiter has some dignity. That's the definition of Saraswati yoga. So meaning that Jupiter should be in his own sign, exalted, or at least in a friendly sign. So if Jupiter is combust or debilitated, it doesn't count. If he's in his enemy's sign, like Taurus, Venus is Jupiter's enemy. So like in Taurus or Libra, doesn't count. So Jupiter should have strength. So does Bono have Saraswati yoga?
Yes.
Yes.
Why do you say that? Make your case.
Well, Jupiter's strong, which we've determined that.
Yep.
Venus and Mercury are in the Trikona house, the fifth house.
Yep. And Jupiter is also in a Trikona or Kendra. All three of them, right, have to be in those houses. And Jupiter has to be strong. So yes, absolutely. Ding, 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 ding. I mean, big time. Because of Jupiter's triple strength. So now, this guy not only has the blessing of Lakshmi, he happens to have the blessing of Saraswati. I swear to you, I didn't pick this chart for this class. Last night, I was just tooling around, and in my old notes, I happened to come across his birth info. I said, let me look at Bono. And I just pulled it up and left it at that. And this morning, as I'm just, as we're doing our class, there are these combos. So Jyotish works in mysterious ways. So Bono is also blessed with Saraswati yoga. Now, here's what you can expect with a person who has Saraswati yoga. They will be interested in learning, storytelling, singing, and music. They will be interested in different cultures and in their own culture, in culture itself, and how to move the culture forward. So anyone with Saraswati Yoga is going to have these qualities in their chart to one degree or another. But in a horoscope where yogas pack on top of each other, we have kind of it's like having not just one star player on your team, but two or more star players. They sort of begin to feed off of each other, meaning that, let's say you have LeBron James, a superstar, and then you add another superstar to that team, like Dwayne Wade, like they had, if you're a basketball person, like in Miami, they all went to Miami, all of the superstars, so they could form a super team. Well, and they won a bunch of championships. The point is, one yoga builds on another. And so in a chart that has one Lakshmi yoga, that's great. But now that it has, we can see it has more yogas, a Saraswati yoga and probably others. Now this is a case for this person is living their life sort of on a level that most people aren't going to be able to. Meaning, everything we know about Bono flying on private jets and having red carpets rolled out for him and blah, 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 to, being a fairly healthy, healthy person that fate and karma is just supporting them to live out their mission on this planet. So that is Saraswati Yoga, named after the goddess, Saraswati. Any questions so far? So now I'm going to move into the yogas named after dudes, and specifically the male gods. And we're going from the more material, the more worldly. So obviously Bono isn't. Actually, he may have wanted to be a priest, if I'm not mistaken. If I remember now, maybe we can read his bio, or one of you guys can read his bio on Wikipedia. See, if I'm not mistaken, I think he maybe wanted to go into the seminary to become a priest at some point. But as you can see, these yogas are yogas for success, and as well as for material as well as spiritual prosperity. So perhaps if he didn't have the Lakshmi yoga, he may have gone into the priesthood, but the Lakshmi yoga also gives physical comfort. So that wasn't to be. All right. So now we're going to move into the three yogas named after Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. All right. And I pulled these up on a website. I will have them written down for you on a separate sheet and how they're formed. So for this one is called Shrikanta Yoga. Shrikanta refers to Shiva, the god of austerity in Hinduism. And this is how it's formed. If the lord of the Lagna, the sun, and the moon are exalted in their own house, or at the very least in a friendly sign, and in a kendra or trikona, the resulting yoga is called Shrikanta. Have you noticed how each of these yogas we've looked at today all have to be in the kendra or trikona? You see how important those houses are in terms of beneficence, in terms of giving good qualities. So the sun, the moon, and the Lord of the Ascendant have to be exalted in their own sign, or at least in a friendly sign, in a kendra or trikona. This is called Shrikanta Yoga. The person with Shrikanta Yoga will wear Rudraksha rosaries, and his body will look like white, shining, covered with sacred ashes. He will be very liberal. So in a sense, they'll be very modest in how they dress. They aren't going to be worried with outer clothing. Now, if you're a Christian or if you live in the modern US, you're not going to be covering yourself with sacred ashes, but you will be humble, right? You won't need to see the need for ostentation. He'll be very liberal and be constantly in meditation of Lord Shiva or Lord Jesus or Lord Buddha. But the point is, you'll constantly be thinking of God with this combination. He will regularly and rigidly perform the prescribed rites and will submerge himself in the worship of Lord Shiva. So, the religious person who honors their tradition. He'll be a friend of the virtuous and have no animosity against any other religious belief. This is very big. So they will honor all religions while honoring their own as well, meaning that they will see the true spiritual nature in everyone and all religious belief. He will become influential and his heart will be enlightened by the worship of Lord Shiva. So, pretty nice yoga, isn't it? Now, this yoga is described by Hart Defoe in the example charts in his Light on Life. If you look in the back under Yogananda, the great saint Yogananda who lived in the 20th century, he has this yoga. And Hart goes at length to describe, how knowing that can immediately steer you to the fact that this is a spiritual chart and not a mundane chart. Just for kicks, let's go back and see if Bono has this. So the yoga is, if the Lagna Lord is in a Kendra, Trikona, and strong. Well, we know that there's Jupiter in its Trikona and it's strong. If the Sun is in a Kendra or Trikona and strong, is the Sun strong in a Kendra or Trikona? Yeah, you bet. Exalted, we've already determined that. And the Moon. Now, is the Moon strong?
No, it's debilitated.
The Moon is not debilitated.
It's not, okay.
The Moon would be debilitated if it were in Scorpio, here.
Okay.
And then exalted in Taurus. But what is the other way that the Moon can be strong? By being?
It's a full moon? Full-ish moon.
By being a foolish moon. And this is very close to being full because it's opposite of the Sun. If you don't know how we got this, when the Moon is close to the Sun, it's newish, dark. When it's far away from the Sun, it's foolish, so very bright. But is it in a Kendra or Trikona?
No.
No. So we don't have the exact Shrikanta yoga here. And moreover, the Moon is in a sign, is not in a friendly sign. Venus is neutral to the Moon. And so by those two counts, this yoga is not formed because it has to be the Sun, the Moon, and the Lagna Lord. And Bono, I think, has had enough, so we're not going to give him this one. Okay. We got to save something for somebody else. So, and with this one, you want to be pretty precise to the definition. The Lagna Lord, and here, 2 out of the 3 are fulfilled, but not the 3rd. All right. So that is Shrikanta Yoga, and I could pull up the chart of Yogananda to show you, but I'll let you refer to it in Light on Life, where that yoga is present. All right, any questions about this yoga before I move to the next one? So this is Shiva. The next yoga is called Srinatha, and it's the yoga for Vishnu. And by the way, like I said earlier, if you can be a Buddhist, Hindu, or a Muslim and have this yoga, it doesn't mean you're going to worship Shiva, but you will worship God in the form of, a benevolent being, a benevolent consciousness that works through other religions, that works and that is present in everyone. So don't take this necessarily literally, And as Hart points out, Yogananda didn't really smear himself with ashes, but he did believe in the universality of religion and so on. All right. So Srinatha Yoga is the yoga for Vishnu. If Venus, the Lord of the ninth, and Mercury are exalted in their own house, or at least in a friendly sign, in a Kendra or Trikona, we have Srinatha Yoga. So now, instead of Sun, Moon, and the first Lord, we have Venus, Mercury, and the ninth Lord. Venus, Mercury, and the ninth Lord. So let's go back to our example chart here. Well, the ninth Lord, here is the ninth Lord again, the Sun. We already know the Sun is exalted in a Kendra or a Trikona. So we got the ninth Lord. What about Venus or Mercury? Do we have the full technical definition of this yoga present?
Well, Venus and Mercury are in a Kendra.
That's right. They're in a great house. So they're definitely fulfilled by house. All three of them, the ninth Lord, Venus, and Mercury, are together. But are they exalted in their own sign or a friend's sign? This is where knowing the planetary friendships and enmities is good to have in the back of your head. If you haven't memorized it, again, it's in Light on Life or Path of Light, James Kelleher's book. So they're in a sign ruled by which planet?
Mars.
Mars, right? Because this is Aries. So is Mars at least a friend to Venus and Mercury? So that we could say that the yoga is fulfilled here.
Don't.
No.
Venus is a blue, Mars is red, so no.
Right, and that's the basic way, right? We remember that we said that Saturn, Venus, and Mercury are the Crips, the blue group. Then Mars, Jupiter, Moon, Sun are in the red group, and never the two shall meet. Although that's not true. There are some crossovers, but generally speaking, the red group and the blue group don't like each other. So Mars is neutral to Venus, if I remember correctly. I think they're both neutral to each other. And Mars is also neutral to Mercury, but even though Mercury hates Mars. But the point is that both Venus and Mercury are not in a very friendly sign, as they would be, say, if they were in Saturn's sign. So Mars, again, technically, the yoga is not quite there. Even though with everything else that's present, we could probably give it to him. And as I mentioned, Venus is in its own nakshatra. Mercury is in Venus's nakshatra. So is the Sun. And Venus and Mercury are friends. So I could make a case for this, for the Vishnu's, the Srinatha Yoga being present. Yes, especially with the other yogas. But technically, it's not there. Does this make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
So, Srinatha Yoga, so let's read the definition and see what that says. The native with Srinatha Yoga will be wealthy. Well, geez, did we need that? They will be splendorous. What does it mean to be splendorous? Well, generous, giving, bright, a light unto others, soft-spoken. Well, okay. His manner of speaking, again, it will be pleasant and witful, smart, bright, intellectual. He will be a devotee of Lord Vishnu. Now, Lord Vishnu, in the Hindu pantheon, incarnates into the world as different great beings, including he incarnated as Krishna, as Rama, but also as the Buddha and as Jesus, according to many believers. So there will be a deep respect for any one of these Messiah figures, including the Buddha, Rama, Krishna, or Jesus, by the person with Srinatha Yoga. They will be respected by others. They will be attractive and will be blessed with virtuous wife or husband, spouse, and noble children. I don't know if Bono has kids. They will have the marks of Lord Narayana, Lord Vishnu, such as the conch chakra on his body. So I guess only his doctor and his spouse are probably privy to those, but even in his hand, we could probably see some special markings of Vishnu. So I think most of these things, if we think about it, do apply to him. And so I think somewhat begrudgingly, I'll have to give him this yoga too. Would you guys agree?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now let's do the last one. This is called Virinchi Yoga. Virinchi has to do with Brahma, the Lord of creation, the bearded god, the bearded creator god in the Vedic Hindu pantheon, who is much like the bearded creation god in the Christian tradition, but in some ways also very different. So this is formed if Jupiter, the Lord of the fifth, and Saturn are placed in the sign of exaltation, own house, or friendly. Same criteria as the other three. So just to review, Shrikanta was the Lord of the Lagna, so the first Lord, Sun and Moon. Srinatha was the ninth Lord, Mercury and Venus. And Virinchi is the fifth Lord, Jupiter and Saturn, in these qualifying conditions. Exalted, own house, or at the very least a friendly sign, while in houses 1, 5, 9, 4, 7, 10. Okay, now let's go back to our example chart. Who can tell me if this yoga is present?
You mean the last one?
Last yoga, yep. I'm just getting up to plug in my computer.
Well, we have the fifth Lord on the Jupiter, but the Saturn.
So who is the fifth Lord?
Oh, wait, the fifth Lord. Wait, no, wait.
Mars.
The fifth Lord is Mars.
Okay, so is Mars in a Kendra or a Trikona?
Yes.
Is he in exalted in his own sign, or at least in a friend's sign?
Friends with Jupiter.
Yes, thank you. Mars is in Jupiter's sign, and Jupiter, Mars, Sun, and Moon are all in that red group, remember? So yes, Mars fulfills the condition as the fifth Lord. What about the rest of them? What's the next?
Saturn are in good houses.
Jupiter and Saturn are both the other planets. And yes, they are in the qualifying house. And we already know that Jupiter is super qualified, right? What about Saturn?
Saturn is not in the friendly. It's in the enemy.
No, in fact, Jupiter cannot be the enemy of any planet.
No, I mean Saturn.
Mm-hmm. So,
Saturn's on Sagittarius. That's not.
right. But who owns Sagittarius?
What do you mean?
Well, is Sagittarius owned by a planet who is friendly to Saturn or an enemy of Saturn? So Saturn is in a sign, Sagittarius, owned by Jupiter, right?
Hmm.
Jupiter is not the enemy of Saturn, but he's also not his friend. Jupiter if you remember from the friend enemy lecture, Jupiter can be the enemy of no planet because he's the guru. Remember, he hates no one. And the moon has no enemies, so nobody hates the moon. Those were the two exceptions to the red group and blue group, criteria of friendship. So earlier when we said the moon is not in an enemy sign, that's because the moon can never be in an enemy sign. Nobody hates the moon. But the moon was not in a friend sign. Venus wants to hate the moon but can't. But she definitely is not a friend to the moon. So likewise with Saturn is in the sign of Jupiter. And Jupiter, although not Saturn's enemy, he's not his friend either. So technically, again, this yoga is not quite there by the book. But is it there in spirit?
Yes.
Especially given the fact that we already have so many of these yogas just bunching up on top of each other. In spirit, I think we can fudge and say, well, the fifth lord meets the criteria, Jupiter meets the criteria, and now Saturn meets most of the criteria. It's in the Kendra, but it just is not technically in a friendly sign. But can we give it to him? I think we probably can. I mean, geez, Louise, this guy. Let's read about what Virinci Yoga says and see if we can see that evinced. The native will be extremely intelligent. Why? Because the fifth lord, the fifth house is now in question. And the fifth house is the house of the intellect. And Jupiter is the planet that signifies the intellect. So both the fifth house and Jupiter are involved. And so he will be fully absorbed in the knowledge of Lord Brahma. Well, Lord Brahma rules creation. And so there is an element of deep creativity here. He will never deviate from the code of conduct prescribed by the Vedas. Well, again, it means a person will be religious or devout in some traditional way. He will be full of good qualities and always happy. He will have many distinguished disciples. Well, that much is true. He will be sweet and noble in his speech. Again, speech comes up. And will be blessed with much wealth, spouse, and children. He or she will shine with spiritual luster, be long-lived, complete control over their senses, and be revered by kings. This is interesting, because isn't Bono quite involved with the president of pretty much every administration? I know he worked with Obama, he worked with Bush, he's worked with John Paul, he's worked with the current Pope, he's worked with the presidents and prime ministers of most countries, hasn't he? So there is a sense, right?
Is he knighted? What did he receive as knighthood or something from the Queen?
He may have. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't, like I said, I just pulled this last night, so I haven't pulled his bio. It'll be interesting to read his bio. But there you go. So when you read these descriptions, and by the way, this is why it's important to go back to the classics. You're learning Jyotish from me as a guide, but really you're learning from the classics, because this is where the wealth of knowledge and wisdom is. And when you read these interpretations, you have to be able to pull them apart. Oh, he'll be revered by kings. Well, there's no kings these days, so forget that. No. This literally applies to this person. They have this quality. Now, if it's in a chart that's maybe not so yogic, in the sense that, well, let's say it's an everyday person, they're not a world famous. Well, they will still likely be respected by their employers or by people in high office, right? So this still has an effect. It's just the magnitude of the effect. They may not be hanging out with Obama, but you may hang out with, you know, the boss, and the boss invites you to the barbecue. Unless it's on a Sunday, because you're very spiritual, you'll say, no, thank you, I can't do it. Okay, so that's Virinchi Yoga, the yoga for Brahma. So these are the three yogas for the male triad in the Hindu pantheon, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And we did two of the female pantheon. There is another one in the female pantheon. Let me just give you that one really quick. It's called Gauri Yoga. And in fact, let's see if we can look it up here. Gauri Yoga. What is Gauri Yoga and how is it formed? Now, I'm doing this online because I want you to see that you can research these yourselves. Okay, even if you don't have the book by so-and-so like B.V. Raman, you can just go online and research. That's the great thing about the internet. You know, the internet was invented for this purpose, for sharing research. You know, and secondly, for watching cats play the piano, but primarily for sharing research. All right. So, yeah, so this is actually the definition that I want to use for Gauri Yoga. This is the Paladipika definition right here. So Gauri is the moon is exalted or in its own sign in a Kendra or Trikona. So again, we're just following with the same definition we've used for the last 5 yogas. All of them have to be in a Kendra or Trikona. And Jupiter aspects the moon. So actually, I don't like this definition here. But this is an alternate definition for Gauri. So the moon exalted or in its own sign in a Kendra or Trikona, aspected by Jupiter. Let's use that. This says if the moon and the 9th lord are exalted in Vishnu Sthana is a Kendra, Lakshmi is Trikona. So Gauri Yoga. So let me just go here to my page and write this down, and I'll write down the definition for you. Moon exalted or own sign in Kendra or Trikona, aspected by Jupiter. Or, as per that other definition, 9th lord in same. So Gauri has to do with the feminine divine as well, as Shiva's wife. So Saraswati is the spouse of Brahma, Lakshmi is the spouse of Vishnu, and Gauri, you could say, is the spouse of Shiva. And again, the effects are tremendous charity, a sense of blessing, and the feminine qualities, as evinced by the moon, are there. All right. Let me, excuse me guys for 1 second. I just have to step away for 1 second. I'll be right back. I'm going to put myself on mute and I'll be back in less than 60 seconds. 1 second. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So any questions so far? How are we doing? Everyone okay so far?
Yes.
Yep.
No questions? I hear a resigned sense of, oh my God, there's more yogas I gotta memorize. Well,
No,
yeah.
my question is more that, you know, all the yoga that we do, it has to do with the Kendra and the Kona, and I'm like, well, if you don't have none of those, then what?
Then you're screwed. No. No. So now we're going to in a different direction. So listen, there's a lot more. So let's get moving. So here is now we're going to go back to the classics and revisit Sage Parashara, who has in the Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra, this book that we've looked into before. We've dipped into this before on how to judge houses and so on. And if you haven't ordered it, you can order it online. It's a 2-volume book. Here, we have it as a PDF, extremely sort of packed together. You can see, in fact, this entire chapter is on one screen, chapter 79, the yogas for asceticism. So here we go. These are the hardcore yogas for spiritual asceticism, meaning people who renounce the world in one way or another. Like they go into a convent, they go live in an ashram, they devote their lives to the spiritual in one way or another. Okay? So if you're tired of Kendras and Trikonas, you'll be happy with this chapter. All right, so the first definition is, and by the way, this document will be in our, in our folder for today. Whenever you see 4 or more planets in one house, in one bhava, that's a yoga for asceticism. Now, it doesn't matter what bhava they're in. But when 4 or more planets with strength, meaning they shouldn't be debilitated in a planetary war, and ideally they shouldn't be combust either, but combustion is okay. Combustion means within 6 degrees of the sun. But if you have 4 planets or more in one house, this is a yoga for asceticism. Okay? And then here it goes on to tell you, depending on which of those 4 planets is the strongest, that's the kind of spirituality the person is likely to follow. So, for example, if one of those 4 planets is Venus and Venus is exalted, the person may have an inclination towards the feminine divine. If it's if that planet is the sun, then the person will have a more solar, a male-oriented aspect towards the divine, and so on. All right, and I'm not going to go through these different sort of indications, but it actually, these are very interesting because, for example, if the strongest planet happens to be Saturn, for example, then the person will be a naked ascetic dwelling in the hills and forests, meaning someone who really actually leaves society completely, who renounces their possessions. And so on. So this is this kind of important, but the actual formation of the yoga is just simply 4 planets. Now, here's the next one. If the Lord of the sign, occupied by the moon, so if the moon's dispositor, basically, has no other aspect on himself and he aspects Saturn, then that is an example of a spiritual yoga. Now, this one and the next one are actually go together. The next one says, and I'll read the next one and explain this. if the lord of the sign occupied by the moon is weak and aspected only by Saturn, the native becomes initiated into the holy order signified by Saturn. All right, let's look at a chart and see if we can see how to find this. And I'm tired of Bono, so let's just pull a Prashna here. And let's do a hypothetical chart. Oh, there we go. We have this present here. All right. Let's say this is the chart of a person. This is how this yoga is formed. It says, when the lord of the sign that the moon sits in is weak and aspected only by Saturn. Well, who is the lord of the sign? Who is the moon's dispositor?
Jupiter?
Jupiter. So if Jupiter is Jupiter aspected by Saturn?
Yes.
So Saturn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, Saturn has a 10th aspect on Jupiter. Then the person will become an ascetic. But it said the planet, if Saturn is the only planet to aspect Jupiter, is Jupiter aspected by other planets?
Yeah, Moon and Venus.
Yeah, Moon and Venus. So in this case, we don't have this yoga formed. Okay. Now,
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, so there are two definitions for this yoga. The first one, so the second one was if the dispositor of the moon, meaning the lord of the sign where the moon sits, is aspected only by Saturn, then that's a spiritual yoga. Okay? And in this case, the dispositor of the moon, which is Jupiter, is aspected by Saturn, but not just by him. So it means the person will have tendencies, but they'll also be very worldly as well, because the moon and Venus aspect and Jupiter as well. Now, but the first definition of this yoga, if I go one day forward, we're going to have this yoga in play. So now watch this. Let's go back to the first definition. If the lord of the Rashi occupied by the moon has no aspect of other grahas on himself, and he aspects Shani, the native gets initiated into the holy order of the planet who is the stronger among the two between him and Saturn. So let me explain this. In this chart, who is the lord, who is the dispositor of the moon?
Mars.
Mars. Now, technically, Mars should have no other aspect on him. So does Mars have any planet aspecting him? Actually, here, let me
Jupiter?
go.
No.
Yeah, Jupiter does aspect him. So if the lord of the Rashi occupied by the moon, having no aspect of other grahas, aspects Shani. So in this case, Mars has the aspect of Jupiter. But let's just keep going. Does Mars now aspect Saturn?
Yep.
Yeah. So again, so in this chart, this yoga is mostly formed. The dispositor of the moon, Mars, aspects Saturn. But we don't have the final criteria, which is that he himself should be unaspected, meaning he should have no other interests except renunciation. So in this horoscope, again, there may be renunciate tendencies, but not quite fully, because he has Jupiter aspecting. Do you see how hard it is, though, to find a chart that's clean with this yoga? It's not easy, because most people are not interested in renouncing the world. If anything, most people are interested in succeeding and being involved in the world, in making money and having families and going to ball games, right? That's 99% of all of us. So these renunciate yogas will tend to be rare. But here we got a couple of instances where they almost hit. Now, the fact that Jupiter aspects, I could make a case in this chart, since Jupiter is the Lord of the ninth, that this is a fully formed spiritual combination, because Jupiter is not only a spiritual planet, he happens to be Lord of the ninth house here. So instead of diverting Mars to other interests, he's going to add ninth house interests. So this to me is a fully formed yoga for spiritual success by itself. Okay? All right. I'm going to keep going. I know your head's starting to spin already, but you asked for this, so this is the, these are Jyotish for spiritual combinations. Now, here we get into one of the biggies, and this is one of the most well-known combos. And I'm going to just write it out here because it's actually good to see this. When the moon, so this happens in the D9, is in the Navamsha of Saturn or Mars, and aspected by Saturn, it gives a tendency towards renunciation. Okay, so the following yoga is found only in the D9. So this is, again, one of the uses of the Navamsha. And in fact, more technically, it's when it's in the Navamsha of Mars and aspected by Saturn equals renunciation. Let me see in Parashara here how they put it. If Chandra, the moon, is in the Drekana, no, that's the Drekana. Yeah, so we'll stick to this definition here. So when the moon is in a Navamsha of Mars, which means what? In Aries or Scorpio. So when the moon is in Aries or Scorpio in the Navamsha, and in the Navamsha it's aspected by Saturn, that is a primo yoga for renunciation. Okay? So Eleni, are you happy? We're getting yogas that don't rely on the Kendras and the Trikonas. I hope you're happy.
Yep.
Okay, so now, so for this, we're going to the Navamsha, right? So do we have this yoga here? First of all, let me turn off the degrees here. That should make it easier to see. Is the moon in a sign of Mars in the Navamsha?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in Aries. Is it aspected by Saturn?
No.
No, so we don't have the yoga. But if the moon had been here in Scorpio, in fact, what if I advance this? Aha! How about now? Is there a yoga for renunciation?
Yes.
Yes, why? Because moon is in a sign of Mars, Scorpio, and aspected by Saturn. Ding, 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 ding. Now, if you didn't know that, and you were just reading this chart, you'd go, oh, look, he has Jupiter in the 10th house. That's good. Venus exalted in the 4th. Oh, that's good. Oh, look, 3 planets in the 5th house, right? You'd go house by house, and oh, Saturn in the ascendant. Oh, okay, that's not that good. Mars in the 6th. Okay, maybe, yeah, that's okay. You see, but the yoga immediately contextualizes a person's life within, and even if they, within a certain set of parameters, meaning that even if they don't join a spiritual group, they will have renunciate tendencies, just based on that combination. Now, of course, you want confluence, you want to confirm. So you want to check to see if there are spiritual combos in this chart. And of course, you would go through, is there Saraswati yoga? Well, you bet, there's Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, right? And Jupiter is strong because he's retrograde. So there's Saraswati yoga. Is there Lakshmi yoga? Well, look, the 9th Lord, Sun, is exalted, and the Lagna Lord is strong. Yes, there is Lakshmi yoga here. I'm going fast, but I want to show you how you would do it in a reading. You would find one yoga and go, okay, are there other spiritual yogas to confirm this? So yeah, in fact, this guy has Lakshmi yogas, or this person. They have Saraswati yoga. Okay, do they have Shrikanta, the Lord, the Sun, the Moon, and the Lord of the Lagna, in Kendras or Trikonas, in friendly or exalted? Absolutely, there it is. The Sun is exalted, Moon is in a friendly sign, Lord of the Lagna, Jupiter, is in a Kendra Trikona, is in Mercury sign, but close enough. So boom, Shrikanta yoga. Is there Srinatha yoga, the Lord of the 9th, Venus, and Mercury? Not quite, because Mercury doesn't fit. But do you see what I'm doing? You want to go through this whole list and see how much of a case you can make. So this is a very spiritual chart. If this, whichever baby's born at this time. So here's the moon. The dispositor of the moon is Mars. Mars aspects Saturn. There's another one. That was the yoga. Now, yes, Mars has the aspect of another planet on him, so it's not technically 100%, but pretty close. So that's how I would go about stacking these yogas. All right, let's do the last couple in this chapter. If the moon, now instead of the Navamsha, we're going to go into the D3, the Drekana. If the moon is in a Drekana of Saturn, or in the Navamsha of Saturn or Mars. Okay, so that's where I was going earlier. So let me just finish that thought. So if the moon is in Navamsha of Mars, you can add or Saturn. So Capricorn, Aquarius, and aspected by Saturn. So this is the full D9 renunciate yoga. The next one we're doing is when the moon is in a sign of Saturn in the D3. And aspected by Saturn. We get renunciation. So now we're going to use this other subchart that's not the D9, it's the D3. So we already know we have this in the D9. Let's look to the Drekana. There's the D3. Okay. And we'll turn off the degrees so you can see it more clearly. Voila. So the moon in the Drekana, immediately we can see it is in fact with Saturn, but is it in a sign of Saturn? Well, no. It's in Sagittarius, The signs of Saturn are Capricorn and Aquarius. So this yoga is not there, even though part of it is formed. So if you had this client with you, I think you could certainly soar by, including these yogas in your interpretation. In addition to, oh, what a great fourth house you have. You have a Venus exalted in it and Jupiter aspects. He's the Lord of the fourth, so you have great education. Boy, you must be so happy. Well, that may be true, but that may not be the main theme of this person's life. Okay? So, if the Lord of the Rashi occupied, okay, we did that. If Moon is in a Drekana of Saturn, or in the Navamsha of Saturn or Mars, and aspected by Saturn, the native will become an ascetic, a spiritual renunciate. All right. And finally, I'll do the last one here. When Saturn occupies the 9th house and is not aspected by any planet, that itself is a yoga for spirituality. So before you go, just remember that one. If you have Saturn in the 9th house with no other aspect on it, that's a strong indicator for spirituality. So I'm gonna wind it up here because I think maybe this may be overwhelming you a little bit, but being astrology, Vedic astrology being what it is, there are many more combinations for spirituality, but I think these are some of the big ones. You see 4 planets in one house, boom, think spirit, think person may want to retire from society. So if I show you Albert Einstein's chart, let's go to his chart, see if I can open his chart.
And Simon, if the strongest planet is Mercury, what does that indicate in terms of
The person,
spirituality or whatever?
a good debater, someone interested in dialogue, communication, in teaching, spreading the teachings. Mercury also, right? Because think of the quality of the planet. It's about dialogue, communication. Mercury also has to do with Vishnu. So it could be something related to Vishnu if the person is Hindu, or Christ Jesus if they are, in a Christian tradition. Okay. So here's the chart of Professor Einstein. Does Professor Einstein have a Pravrajya yoga? Pravrajya is a big $100 word that means renunciation. Oops, sorry. Anyone?
He has 4 planets in his 10th house.
Bingo, there it is. 4 planets in the 10th house. And yeah, and that's a yoga for renunciation. Now, he doesn't have the D9 yoga. Moon is in a sign of Saturn, but it's not aspected by Saturn. If you can see here, it's kind of small. There we go. Let's make this. Okay, so he doesn't have that one. In the D3, Moon is with Saturn, but again, not in a sign of Saturn, so he doesn't have that one. So you can actually go through these pretty quickly once you know them. But there are the 4 planets right there in one house. So definitely there will be a tendency to renunciation. And Professor Einstein, although a worldwide well-known public figure because he has massive Raja yogas for success, he was also a very private, withdrawn person who loved to be in his cottage, you know, away from prying eyes, and to do his thought experiments. So again, it doesn't mean you're a monk, but you will have renunciate tendencies if one of these yogas is present.
So regardless of the house that the 4 planets are in, you'll have that.
Regardless of the house, correct. Now, Professor Einstein also has Saraswati Yoga, doesn't he? There's Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury in Kendras or Trikonas. Jupiter, well, he's in the sign of a planet that's at least neutral to him. So maybe we can get away with that. Does he have the other yogas? So Lagna Lord is debilitated, so no, that one's not going to work with the Lagna Lord, Sun, and the Moon. What about the 9th Lord, Venus and Mercury? The 9th Lord is Saturn. Venus is exalted. Yeah, we could say he has the Vishnu. But again, they're not perfect because Mercury is debilitated. So he has definitely renunciate tendencies, but whether he's a full-on adherent to a religion, probably not. And I think if you've read some of Einstein's stuff, he was deeply interested in, he said, my goal is to know the mind of God. All else is just details. And so a deeply spiritual person, although not necessarily a religious one, right? So there you go. That's the 4 planets. And that you can see right away in an instant, that particular yoga. And because, you know, when you bring up the houses, the house that it happens in will often give you which area of life that will express through. So in his case, his career was, in a sense, looking at the sky, you know, trying to find out the origin of creation. That was his job. So his job was to be a spiritually minded person. So even though he was a scientist, I think he was driven by the spiritual questions of why are we here, who are we, who is God, and you know, what is our purpose. So I'm showing you these charts of Bono and Einstein because they were worldly people in a sense, but they were also very much deeply spiritual. And it's not likely that you're going to meet a lot of people who are renunciates because, well, they're renunciates. They're not going to be going to your office knocking at your door unless you work at an ashram or something like that. So, and if you do work at an ashram and you see a chart that has no renunciate yogas, you might kind of, you know, tell the person, hey, close the door. Are you sure you want to be here? You know? And you might get the truth out of them that, well, I'm really here because blah, blah, blah. But if you're not working at an ashram, it's not likely that you're going to see a lot of these super pure yogas purely formed, which is why it's good to see them in worldly people as well, right? And then you can encourage them in their spiritual quest because, you know, you'll see that reflected in the chart. So questions so far? One of the precepts is if in a chart you see many yogas for success, like Raja yogas and spiritual yogas, then remember that in Jyotish everything must play out. So the person will have both success in their life as well as renunciate and spiritual tendencies. It's only when you find a chart that has just spiritual yogas, let's say moon in a sign of Saturn, aspected by Saturn. But the main chart really doesn't have much going for it. No major money yogas or success yogas. Then you could very easily say, well, listen, your life is not about the material, it's about the spiritual, and you will do well to follow a spiritual order. But if a chart has major Raja Yogas, like in this case, one of them is Saturn and Jupiter exchange houses. They're in Parivartana. And it happens to be the Lord of the 10th and the Lord of the 9th exchanging houses, which is a massive Raja Yoga for success. And of course, we have Venus exalted in a Kendra, which is called Malavya Yoga, a yoga for tremendous fame. Well, those two are going to play out in addition to the ascetic yoga. So then your job as a consultant will be helping that person come to terms with both of those realities and teaching them how to be a spiritual person while very much involved in the world. And to that end, knowing your Dharma type certainly helps a great deal, because you know how to do that. So horoscopes that are just spiritual or just material are easy. You can just tell them, this is what your life is about, go for it. It's the ones that have both that will be slightly difficult to deal with. But that's the karma. So we've managed to cover nakshatras and an introduction to spiritual yogas in less than 2 hours. So I'm very pleased with myself. Now, whether or not this has actually been able to implant itself in you, that's another story. So you know I'm available, DTC guys. If you have questions, personal comments, or need clarification, make an appointment with me and we can discuss. Otherwise, we will see you. We'll do a class next week on marriage part 2, where we'll continue with marriage. And in fact, we'll make next week just a Q&A. How's that? So that we can cover marriage questions, spirituality questions, and so on, so that we can clarify the last 2 classes. Any final thoughts, questions before we wind down today? Just for fun, let's go back to Bono's chart and see if we have, I don't know why am I going back to Bono's chart? See if there's any additional of the spiritual yogas. And, oh, all right, well, Jyotish works in mysterious ways. I'm telling you, I hardly ever prepare for these classes, but for some reason, the Jyotish muse throws these charts at me to illustrate some points. So let me show you the last, one last spiritual combination, which Mr. B happens to have, I believe. And actually, it's not in Parashara. It is from another sacred work called Paladipika. 1 second, let me just, yep. All right, so this is Paladipika. In Vedic traditions, it is often the most important things are put at the beginning and at the end. So the way you start is very important, but it's also important to end well. So we're going to end with this final yoga. And I'm going to draw your attention to this book called Paladipika, which is the other classic in Vedic astrology. And if you are an astrologer or wanting to be one, you should own both of these. This is chapter 27 on yogas for renunciation. And you can see here the normal yogas. If at birth 4 or more planets occupy a single house, blah, blah, blah. Right? We've done that. The moon in a Drekana of Saturn and aspected by Mars or Saturn, blah, blah, blah. If the moon is in Navamsha owned by Mars, aspect. We've done this. Let's go through here. This is one we didn't do, by the way, because it's kind of depressing. The moon, if the Lord of the Lagna aspects the moon when the moon is the void of strength, a waning moon, the person will become a miserable ascetic. So I have this combination. The Lord of my ascendant is with the very dark moon, the moon in its 14th phase. And I am a miserable ascetic. Or at least I have done some of this stuff. Distressed and wretched, without wealth or help, and getting his food and drink with great difficulty. And yes, I have definitely been through this. Basically, yeah. So this stuff works, but that's not the yoga that I wanted to end with. I'm just going to take you through a tour before we get to that one. If the ascetic yogas are in, if there should also exist a Raja Yoga, it will pull up by the roots all the bad effects and then make him a lord of the earth. Basically meaning you get the effect of the Raja Yoga as well as the spirituality. Okay. Here, if the Lord, 4 planets again. No, so this is the one. No. All right, so this was toward the beginning. Sorry. Let's find the yoga that I want to end with here. Tricky little yoga is trying to get away from me. Here we go. 1 second. Here we go. It was actually, it was the first shloka. So as I said, the first and the last shlokas are very important in any book or any chapter in the Vedic tradition. So this is the first one. When the Lord of the 10th is with 4 other planets. So we've done that one. But here is the one that I wanted to cover. If the end of a sign is rising, this is it here. And if it's owned by a benefic, and Jupiter occupies your Kendra or a Trikona, the person born will attain emancipation. Oh, that's a big one, huh? If the end of a sign is rising, what does it mean to have the end of a sign? Well, if the last degrees of a sign are rising. And let's see what their commentary says. No, there's no commentary. So I would say this is anywhere from 26 degrees to 30 degrees, like the last Navamsha, 2640 to 30 degrees. And that sign is owned by a benefic, but perhaps most importantly, and Jupiter is in a Kendra or a Trikona, then that person born will attain emancipation. Well, folks, let's go back to our chart that we started with. Talk to me about Bono. Is this yoga present in this chart? Are you guys there?
Yes, here.
Here. Yep. Is this yoga present? So first of all, is the end of the sign rising? Meaning the rising sign is it towards the end? So not at 0 degrees or 15, but yeah, look, it's at 29 degrees. So the ascendant is in its late stages, basically. I would say use anywhere from 26 degrees and 40 minutes up to 30, because that's the final Navamsha of that sign. So yeah, the end of the sign is rising. Well, is Jupiter in a Kendra or a Trikona?
Yes.
Very much so. And Jupiter also, as we've already found, has triple strength. So not only does Bono get all the wealth in the world, he gets to be enlightened at the end of this life. That's great. There is another spiritual yoga. And let me just look at the terminology that it's used here. Lagne grihante sati saumya bhage kendre gurau konagate cha muktaha. Yeah, so basically in the lagna, there is the being, the end of the sign, being owned by a benefic, and on Jupiter's being in the Kendra or Trikona, there is mukta, release, moksha. Now, muktaha means release. It's translated by the word enlightenment, or, oh, actually, no, emancipation, which is actually pretty good. So emancipation from this world, emancipation from what we don't know, but certainly there is a type of spiritual enlightenment connected to this combination. So that is the last combo I will leave you with. Your homework now is to go and find charts that possess these combinations. And as always, I'm thankful to all of you guys for being here and for wanting this class and for being interested in these topics, because otherwise I wouldn't research them, I wouldn't teach them. So thank you for, for bringing them to light. I think this is important work, and you guys are spreading it. So thank you guys for being here. And the Winning with Vedic Astrology guys, we will see you this Sunday. And
Yes.
Everyone is welcome to attend next Thursday, where we will do Q&A on the topics we've covered, marriage and spirituality. All right?
Thank you, Simon.